The problem is that Elda is actually an Edo Otaku. I liked Miko instantly. A lot of those secondary characters suffer from the same problem. Her family name means that they're from a district near the center of Tokyo. There's one fatal flaw that keeps cropping up with Otaku Elf. It gets boring, and I can pinpoint exactly why. But I also think that despite this, you should give the show a chance. Let's check it out. So I mentioned that Otaku Elf's fatal flaw is that it can become boring, but that's not because it's a slice of life show or because it's slower paced or because the stakes are low. Ironically, Otaku Elf can get boring because Elda is an otaku. If you haven't seen it, Otaku Elf is a slice of life anime about an elf named Elda who gets summoned to Tokyo to be the goddess for a local Shinto shrine. She becomes obsessed with video games, collectibles, anime, pretty much all otaku culture. This leads her to shut herself away in her room and become a social recluse. She occasionally butts heads with her young Miko, or shrine maiden, who tries to keep her on track and who juggles her shrine duties with school and with wanting to be seen as a mature woman. From time to time, we also get appearances from the Miko's younger sister, Koyuzu, who's an aspiring chef, as well as a couple of other shrine elves and their Mikos. But most of the time the show is about Elda and Koita getting on each other's nerves, followed by one or the other showing compassion and deepening their bond. And history lessons, like a surprising amount of history lessons. The problem is that Elda is actually an Edo Otaku, and the way that this is presented often clashes with the tone of the rest of the series. In case you didn't know, Edo was the old name for Tokyo during feudal times. It seems like the whole secret purpose of the show is to geek out about the history of the Edo period, rather than to showcase a kooky elf who's really into manga and RPGs. In Japanese, the title of the anime is Edomai Elf, which is why I always call this show Edamame Elf in my mind. Edomai means from Edo, or in front of Edo, and it can refer to a type of sushi that was invented in Edo and used seafood that was taken from Tokyo Bay. If you've had sushi before, especially outside of Japan, it was probably Edomai style. The implication of the name in the title is that Elda is a true blue native of old Tokyo, and this version of the title directly associates her with Tokyo's Edo period. The problem with Elda being an Edo Otaku is twofold. One, it's kind of a bait and switch since she's presented as being more what most anime fans consider otaku culture, anime, video games, collectibles, but in reality her function is more to educate the viewer about detailed bits of Edo's history. And two, the presentation of those bits of history often clash with the rest of the show in my opinion, and made me zone out from time to time. Elda's history lessons are presented in sepia tones, probably to make them look more like the woodblock prints that were common in the era. I found those segments much less visually interesting than the rest of the show, although this may have been amplified because I really like the show's main art style. The Edo scene sometimes felt like information overload on subjects that I didn't really care about. It didn't help that Elda and Miko would throw around a lot of really specific sounding Japanese terms that related to ultra-precise parts of Edo's culture, like the names for different types of umbrellas, for instance. I do like learning about history, but I wanted to see these characters have their own interesting stories instead of acting as guides for a history lesson, which happened too often. I could argue that the main cast of this show consists of just 2, maybe 3 characters, which is another problem. But those main characters that we do get, I instantly wanted to root for. Elda is an elf who was summoned by the Kogane family over 400 years ago, and she's been living in Tokyo ever since as the shrine's resident deity. She's very shy and dislikes crowds and venturing outside her room. She's basically a shut-in who would rather stay at home with her video games, manga, and anime than go anywhere or meet anyone, which means she's pretty much elf me. But she's also a gentle person who's as quick to show gratitude as she is to ask for favors. And because she cares about others, she occasionally braves the outside world and performs her shrine duties. Everybody seems to like her, and the townsfolk have an almost parental fondness for her social hang-ups. Koita Kogane is the main human character of the show. She's a shrine maiden, which is what Miko means in Japanese. Her family name, Kogane, means that they're from a district near the center of Tokyo, which makes sense if they've been tending a shrine in Tokyo for 400 years. That given name Koito means little thread in Japanese, and it's the name of a river that empties into the Tokyo Bay. This means that both of Miko's names tie her directly to the Tokyo or Edo region. I liked Miko instantly. She's got a bit of a fire in her, quick to anger but quick to forgive as well. Miko longs to be a sophisticated and fashionable woman of the world, but recognizes that she's not quite grown up enough to pull off that look. She's a decent-hearted person who's fond of Elda and wants her to do her best, which is why she sometimes finds herself being the stern taskmaster to someone who's nearly 40 times her age. One thing I really like about Otaku Elf is the art style. The Kogane sisters are totally cute, and I liked almost all the character designs. The show jumps in between its standard style and super deformed style a lot, and the two styles make a good match. One thing that stood out was how a lot of the lines and color shading looked like they were made by hand, even though of course they were produced digitally. Sometimes the blendings of the color almost looked like it was drawn by crayon. The production values remain high throughout the show, at least to my untrained eye, and I appreciated that Otaku Elf definitely seemed to have its own unique art style. So even if my interest in the plot would dip, I always enjoyed looking at the show outside of those sepia-toned woodblock shots. The OP for the show really grew on me as the show went along. It's a nice blend of traditional singing style and traditional sounding instruments with a more modern twist, like the show in general. Visually, there's a great shot of Miko walking right beside Elda and growing in phases from a young girl into the present-day shrine maiden. There are a few moments in the show where they really leaned into that theme of Elda watching over Miko and helping her grow after her mother passed away, and I really wish they'd had more moments like that. The music for the ED was fine, but I loved the visuals. They've got this 2D, 3D thing going on that felt really crisp. It was a good contrast to the show's main art style. It was just fun to look at. I thought both Elda and Miko were likable characters who had enough depth to make their interactions interesting, but often the rest of the cast felt like pop-in characters who had their moment and then were gone. Miko's grandfather runs the shrine, but we never see his face, and he ends up as more of a running gag than anything else. Some of the parishioners appear in more than one episode, but they have a line or two at most. Miko's friend, Koma Sakuraba, is a recurring character, but we learn almost nothing about her other than she appears to be a confident go-getter type. The other two elves, Yord and Hyra, had great character designs, and I was really looking forward to their appearances since they seemed so fun and interesting in the OP. But when they finally show up, Hyra's personality is centered around gambling and not much else, and Yord is just kind of annoying. They're also only in the show for about 1.5 episodes each, which felt like a missed opportunity. Miko's sister Koyuzu has the biggest role in the show after Miko and Elda, but the only things we know about her are that she's sweet and she likes to cook. A lot of those secondary characters suffer from the same problem. Their characters are built around external traits like cooking or gambling rather than internal motivation. The lack of well-developed characters outside of the main two means it can be tough to find interesting plots for the episodes because the main pair only has each other to play off of. I was super excited for Otaku Elf after watching the first episode. Unfortunately, that's probably the best episode of the show. Otaku Elf is a beautifully illustrated world filled with likable characters who don't have much to do. Watching it is kind of like waiting at a bus stop with a couple of friends. Sure, you're with people you enjoy hanging out with, but it's not exactly the most riveting experience that you can have. I give Otaku Elf a 6 out of 10 golden frog tanks. Skip it if you're not a slice of life fan, but if you are, then give it a couple of episodes to see what you think. Let me know in the comments if you had a similar experience with Otaku Elf, or if I just offended your elf-loving sensibilities with this review. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. That line was so good, I sent someone to the hospital.